Yayasan Plan Internasional Indonesia memperjuangkan sebuah dunia yang adil dan mengedepankan hak anak serta mendorong kesetaraan bagi anak perempuan. Kami beroperasi di 7 provinsi dan 16 kota kabupaten di Indonesia. Plan Internasional telah mensponsori sekitar 35.000 anak di Indonesia dan menargetkan untuk mendukung 1 juta anak perempuan di Indonesia untuk menjadi agen perubahan. Empat program utama kami adalah perlindungan dan tumbuh kembang anak, kesehatan dan penguatan kapasitas diri remaja, ketenagakerjaan dan kewirausahaan kaum muda, respons dan kesiapsiagaan terhadap bencana. Kami juga mendukung sebuah kampanye global kesetaraan bagi anak perempuan. Kampanye ini ingin mendorong perubahan sosial sehingga anak perempuan dan perempuan muda memiliki kuasa terhadap hidupnya dan bisa mempengaruhi dunia di sekitarnya. Yuk, bantu wujudkan mimpi dan ciptakan masa depan yang cerah untuk anak-anak dan kaum muda, terutama anak dan kaum muda perempuan di Indonesia bersama kami.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a typical NGO CSO forum, okay? So be a bit more excited. This is going to be a free discussion, a bit more relaxed, because we have a special speakers and young people among us. So we've been listening to government officials, UN officials, and private sector. But we would like to hear today, this afternoon in our session, from young people. We're talking about the future of work. We're talking about learning. We're talking about next generations. We're talking about young people. I would like to invite Putri Rohmayani. Please, Putri, bisa dibantu. Putri is a youth champion from Tech Muda Project from Plant Indonesia. Hati-hati. Putri will share her experience. It will be in Indonesian, but you will already have, I think, the support if you don't understand Indonesian. Iya, tolong. Sebentar ya, Putri. Udah. Oke. Tenang aja Putri, anggap aja nggak ada orang. Ya.
Nggak lihat juga, Bu.
Enggak. Lucu, lucu. Oke. Ya, Putri bisa mulai? You can start, Putri.
Selamat siang semuanya. Saya Putri. Saya adalah salah satu peserta Tek Muda angkatan pertama. Saya dulu ikut Tek Muda di tahun 2020. Ya, saya ikut Tek Muda angkatan pertama dan saya peserta di batch 4. Waktu itu batch 4 adalah pertama kalinya di Tek Muda menerima peserta disabilitas. Jadi di kelas saya waktu itu ada 25 orang peserta dan 2 diantaranya adalah penyandang disabilitas, khususnya penyandang disabilitas netra. Jadi saya sebenarnya jadi tunanetra itu baru di tahun 2016, dan di Tek Muda adalah pertama kalinya juga buat saya belajar di setelah saya jadi tunanetra, saya belajar di lingkungan yang inklusi, di mana orang dengan disabilitas dan tanpa disabilitas belajar secara bersama-sama. Di awal challenging ya buat saya sendiri, dan mungkin buat trainer di kelas, buat tim plan juga. Tapi untungnya waktu itu dari teman-teman plan sangat support kami dan encourage kami untuk tetap berjuang, tetap lanjut di pelatihan, selalu melakukan adjustment supaya kami yang disabilitas juga tetap bisa berpartisipasi secara aktif di kelas. Dan di Tek Muda ini saya nggak cuma dapat pelatihan hard skill, saya juga dapat pelatihan soft skill. Kami dapat mentoring persiapan kerja, dan bahkan dapat mentoring untuk mempersiapkan wirausaha. Karena waktu itu kita setnya lagi pandemi ya, jadi untuk peluang kerja agak susah gitu. Dan setelah Tek Muda, saya mengikuti dengan berbagai skill yang saya dapatkan di Tek Muda. Waktu itu saya dan beberapa teman saya memberanikan diri untuk ikut sebuah kompetisi hackathon yang diadakan oleh Telkom, dan waktu itu kami mendapatkan juara 1 dengan membangun sebuah website bernama Edubilitas, sebuah online platform yang kita rancang khusus untuk teman-teman disabilitas. Kita mendapatkan juara 1 untuk kategori education. Dan setelah semua skill yang saya dapat dari Tek Muda itu juga jadi dasar untuk saya melanjutkan ke pelatihan-pelatihan yang lebih lanjut lagi, dan semua itu jadi bekal sampai saya sekarang sudah bisa bekerja sebagai testing engineer di sebuah geospatial company, Bumi Varta Teknologi. Jadi harapan saya ke depannya ada lebih banyak lagi pelatihan yang memberikan fasilitas buat kami, kaum muda, perempuan, termasuk juga dengan teman-teman disabilitas, supaya kami bisa berkembang dan bisa memunculkan potensi terbaik kami. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, thank you Putri. Silakan Putri boleh duduk, Mas tolong dibantu. So our topic for this afternoon is ensuring no one left behind, investing in inclusive learning for youth, for young people. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dini Widyastuti. I work for Plan Indonesia. We work with young people to prepare them for the work of for work or entrepreneurship as young adults and young people in Indonesia. But as a child rights organization, we're actually working to promote child rights from infancy until young adults. Yeah, we're working with a lot of young people in the marginalized areas, in the rural areas in Indonesia, at the moment in 8 provinces. So when we're talking about investing in inclusive learning, is for youth with disabilities, but also young people living in rural areas in Indonesia with very limited access to education, to the internet, and many other limited opportunities. For this discussion this afternoon, I would like to invite the panels. Dr. Piti, Sri Sangnam, could you please join me here? And Monsieur Daniel Dahir, and my colleague Ana Maria Peña. So before we start, I would like to introduce the panel for our talk show. First, starting from Putri Rohmayati. Putri has already introduced herself. At the moment, she's working as back-end developer at PT Digital Tranco Global. So we hope there are more companies who are supporting young people and young people with disability to work. And then we can talk about later about the partnership with private sector, etc. But Putri is actually it's quite impressive. Putri at the moment you're still studying, Putri? Masih belajar ya Putri ya? Informatic Engineering at University Pamulang. But she has also another degree, Chemical Engineering, from University of Indonesia. And she has some awards here, and then certification. So this is really the kind of role model for other young people, especially young people with disability. And this is what we need more of. And then the other speaker is Dr. Priti Sringsanam, who is the Executive Director of ASEAN Foundation. So Dr. Priti is also Assistant Professor of Economics at Chulalongkorn University, and he is the 2021 Dongfang Scholars at Peking University in China. Welcome to our talk show. And then we have, you probably already know, Daniel Barril, the Executive Director of the Institute for the Cooperation in Adult Education. So the name here, because he has two hats at least two hats. The chairs of a governing board.
Like so many of us.
Chair of the governing board of UNESCO Institute of Lifelong Learning. And my colleague, Ana Maria Peña, who is from Plan Netherlands, but at the moment representing Plan International. And she is the Senior Youth Economic Empowerment Advisor. But interestingly, Ana Maria is a chemical engineer. Yeah, I just knew that. Yeah. There's a connection then. But Anna has been leading and managing the multi-countries youth employment and entrepreneurship program in Latin America and Asia, and provide guideline and advice for our program all over the world. So in the last 5 years, she's managed the development of digital tools and innovations to optimize our YE programming of Plan International, including the YES Academy, which is an e-learning platform in Indonesia, Philippines, Myanmar, and Vietnam, which Ana Maria can talk a little bit more about that. But more than that, she has worked more than 15 years as an environmental advisor. So maybe some of the learning in youth and climate change, how do we do the transition, just transition, we can also discuss about that. Okay, without further ado, I would like to have the discussion, and I hope we will have time also with the audience to have a discussion with the panels, and also I encourage the panels to also share with each other and ask each other questions. But I would like to ask Dr. Piti actually, because ASEAN Foundation and Plan has done a research on ASEAN youth employment situation post-COVID as well as before COVID. But when we're talking about lifelong learning and young people and investment, of course there is a there's a few, how can this learning and education for young people also contributing to the economic growth in ASEAN? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about the findings of the research.
Okay. So for the research about the youth employment in Southeast Asia countries, we found like 6 common criteria in 10 Southeast Asian nations. These 6 criteria are demographic challenge. The second one is the skills mismatch. The third one is about the informal employment. The fourth one is about the entrepreneurship and self-employment. And then the fifth one is the digital skill and technologies. And last but not least, in some ASEAN countries, we also experience the situations of the gender disparities. So I will elaborate one by one, start from the demographic challenges. Currently, ASEAN countries have a significant youth populations, especially in Indonesia, the Philippines, and CLMV countries, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, and Vietnam. Hence, ensuring productive employment opportunities for them is crucial to harnessing the regional demographic dividends. And at the same time, allow the people to flow in 10 ASEAN countries. We also fix the problems of labor shortage that already happens in the age societies such as Singapore and Thailand. And then the problem of the next thing that we consider as the problems and challenges is the problem of skills mismatch. I think in the morning, the plenary sessions mentioned about this for so many times already, that there's the gap between the skill acquired through educations and the skill demanded by the job markets. Hence, this is sometimes leads to the difficulties in securing a quality employments. Then the third criteria, the third finding, is about the informal sectors, the informal employment, the underemployment. The informal employment in Southeast Asia characterized by low pay, of course, lack of social protection, social welfare, and limited career advancement. There's no career paths. Hence, these kind of situations is very, very important issues because we don't want our young people to end up working in this kind of informal sectors because it will limit their opportunities. And then the entrepreneurship and self-employment. This is the very, very good way to fix the problems of informal employment and underemployment. We may need to empower them more in terms of entrepreneurship skill, how to do business. Because we have to keep in mind that in Southeast Asia, for example, in Indonesia, 57% of the GDP of these countries contributed by small and medium-sized enterprises. The same number, about 40% in Thailand and 37% in Malaysia. Hence, if we can empower them to know how to start their own business, doing the startups, this is the good opportunities. And of course, to do the startup in these 21st centuries, it's come to the fifth finding about the digital skill and technologies. Because we also found that not only literacy, reading and writing, but of course, digital literacy is also very, very important. The youth in the Philippines spend more than 9 hours a day in front of social media. And then they know nothing about cybersecurity, they don't have enough digital literacies. And last but not the least is the problems of gender disparities. Gender disparities persist in labor market, especially with young women facing additional barriers to employment compared to their male counterparts. Addressing gender inequalities and promoting gender responsive policies are crucial for inclusive youth employment. And this problem is even more acute or even worse for the group of LGBTIQ+, especially who living in or working in the member states of ASEAN who have, relatively close societies. So that's the finding from the research.
Thank you, Dr. Pitti. You mentioned about gender equality. We heard yesterday that female labor participation in Indonesia is stuck at about 54%. That's for the kids, it's like that. I'm sure there are other explanation other than just education, actually. But we were looking at the data that from the Indonesia Bureau of Statistics, it says that for people with disability, there are about 17 million at the productive age, and only about 7.6 millions of them are employed. So definitely there's a lot of homework. There's a huge task here. If we're talking about women, about young people with disability, there's a lot there. But from the research as well, has there been an identifications of the kind of skills that the young people needs to develop to be able to compete in this kind of more challenging environment?
Correct. For the skill that we need to develop them, we talk about 6 skills. The first one is about, of course, technical and digital skills at all levels. ASEAN Foundations work very hard with, for example, Google.org, with Microsoft, with Huawei, and with SAP in order to start, ignite the knowledge of digital to the layman in Southeast Asia. Especially we focus on the child, but for some countries, for example, in Singapore, their kids is so very well equipped with the digital literacy. Hence, we changed the target group to the older people. The older generation seems to be the problems in Singapore when it's come to the problem of digital illiteracies. Apart from that, the second skill that we need very much in order to empower our youth is about the soft skill. Soft skills, also known as transferables or the interpersonal skills, are highly sought after by the employers. In the 21st centuries, we need to develop a stronger sense of empathy. We need to develop the sense of teamwork, how to contribute to your teams, the ability to have a good communications, the spirit of teamwork and collaborations, complex problem solvings, adaptabilities, leadership skill, critical thinkings, creativities, and of course, glowing friendship and network. This is the soft skill that we try very hard in order to indirectly empower them through a lot of activities conducted by ASEAN Foundations. For example, towards the end of this month, we are going to organize one big event in Bangkok. We gather the youth from 10 ASEAN countries to join the program so-called Empowering Youth Across ASEAN and teach them about this kind of soft skill. We work with Maybank Foundations. The third skill is about, of course, entrepreneurial skill. We need them to be able to work for their own, create their own career paths, business mindset, how to be a good startup. In this area, we work closely with European organizations such as GIZ and the private sectors from the European country as well, the SAP, on how to equip them in these kind of issues. And then the fourth skill that I believe everybody needs in Southeast Asia is the language proficiencies. But when we talk about language proficiency, we are not only to limit it to only English language. Nowadays, you can choose your own second language, either Hindi, because India and South Asia is the huge target, huge market. China, of course, Chinese. This is also the very, very huge market. Or Arabian language. This is also very, very important. And then the fifth one, we're talking about the industry-specific skill. We need, like the plenary session said, the more collaborations between the employers and the NGO and the education institutions in order to develop the skill that tailor-made for the business firms. And last but not the least, of course, this is also very, very important, lifelong learning and adaptabilities. Because the major problems right now, especially for the kids now, is that they don't know what they don't know. Right? So when they don't really know what is their own problems, so they don't know how to fix it. And even sometimes they know what is their flaw. They don't even know how to fix it. Hence, lifelong learning is the process that we help our kids in order to be able to gather the knowledge that will fulfill their, demand by either formal or informal education systems. So that's the sixth skill that we need the most for our kids in ASEAN countries.
Thank you, Dr. Biti. I think I'm really interested with the soft skills one that you mentioned, empathy, creativity, working together, leadership. I think this is actually the points that in the last 2 days I haven't really heard much about it. It's probably in the document somewhere, but I think while we're talking about technology, AI, this is then what puts human.
Correct. This is the human factor that made us different from the machine.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the creativity also, yesterday talking about sharing about how do we formulate questions that involves critical thinking, involves also creativity in that. I would like to ask about this experience to Putri later, but before going to Putri, I would like to ask Mr. Daniel Barrio to comment and share your perspective. You can use any hats. I told you you're the boss, so you can use your NGO hats, you can use your UNESCO hat to see about these challenges in terms of implementing, moving from commitment to action.
It's a very important question. Just for you to understand the context, I'm the executive, my regular job. UIL chairing is just a privilege that's added to my regular job. I'm the executive director of a CSO research centers on adult learning and education policy. We're in Canada, based in Montreal. Our mandate is the francophone part of Canada. So there's one province, Quebec, where there is a majority, a francophone majority, and there's francophone in a minority context all across Canada. The other element that's important to take into account, talking about education in Canada, it's a federation and it's highly decentralized. The Constitution says that education is a provincial mandate, and provincial government are very defensive and pushing the federal government every time the federal government wants to get involved in education. So that's important to know. So there's 10 provinces, 10 education system, 10 culture, etc. They're regrouped into a Federation Council of Education Minister, but it's a highly decentralized. In terms of monitoring the experience, and now I'm talking about a CSO, but at the same time, I'll finish about the two other hats I have, which feeds my reflection on monitoring. The Canadian context about adult learning and education, and the youth part of our work would be more youth as future adult, in a lifelong learning perspective. It's not exactly adult learning, but they're future adult. And when do we start to be an adult? Is it 15? Legally, it's 15. 18 years old, but in the school system in my province in Quebec, at 16 years old, you're considered an adult for school purposes. So what's an adult? And I'm not talking about maturity and sociologically, that's another topic. So the two elements of the context, the challenges of monitoring in Canada is adult learning and education is not a priority, either for the province or the federal government. And it was showed really in a strong way during the pandemic because they focused mainly on school continuity for the youth, but adult learners in literacy groups were not provided for. The groups just closed down during the lockdown, etc. And we really saw in a nutshell of how adult learning was not a priority. That's the first element. And even less so, the Kunjungi process or international commitment, it's not priority, and CSO like ours are the main bearer of the cause of Kunjungi process, recalling the province that they have committed internationally, and actually being one of the only voice that keeps alive the Kunjungi process, the international adult learning commitment, and make sure that the government don't lose track that they've committed, and they have to deliver. The other aspect of it, and I think it shows a bit the effect of the pandemic and youth as future adult. I intersect with what you said. I think we've failed as a society because what stunned me during the pandemic with youth related, it's the learning loss part was well documented and we keep on documenting, but it's the high level of mental health issues and youth teenagers that were disoriented because they weren't at school. At first I thought, is it a school thing? Is it like they prefer in presence than the online setting? But actually I think in a more deepest way, it's not a pedagogical and a learning modalities debate. It's their resiliencies and their sense of identity. And we kind of fail them in terms of teach as parents, as society, as government, in terms of teaching them something else than basic mathematics, geography, history, etc. It's how to be a human being. It's learning to be. And I think it's a major waking up as government, as policymaker, as CSO, is adults are not only skilled or unskilled people to be upskilled, they're also human beings. And the learning to be part, we failed them because they were disoriented. The level of mental health. So now we're rushing, we're rushing to fill up the learning gap, the mathematics part, the history part. But we're not dealing with the mental health issue. We're still haven't understand as a society. I speak for Canada, and I'm probably there's a commonality. So in terms of adult education research centers and adult educators looking at the future, the next generation of adult, we have a major job to do. And we're going to have at some point to bring back in the policy debate the learning to be, in all its nuanced, You mentioned some of them, social emotional competencies, even spiritualities, etc., etc. In a really material world, we've lost something. We haven't trained, educate our youth to be grounded, whatever the context. And resiliency, it's not only problem solving as a generic 21st century skill, it's way more than that. It's not only creativity. And I think as a challenges. So regarding the monitoring part, Confintea, what I find really fundamental, the Marrakesh Framework of Action, and now I'm kind of putting another hat. I was chairing the drafting committee of the Confintea conference. So I feel I'm a fiduciary of the Marrakesh Framework of Action. And for the next 12 years, till the next Confintea, I think it's my duty to speak about the MFA and to push and to really defend it. And one part of it that I find really fundamental, two parts. First of one, if you read it, there's a section on the expanding learning domain. There's a few of them there: citizenship education, sustainable education. It's not completed. Learning to be is not there. Well-being is not there. But the spirit of it is right now, in our time, adults and youth have to learn a wide variety of competencies in different spheres of their life. That's the more comprehensive understanding. It's not only skilling, upskilling, it's important, reading, writing, it's fundamental, but we're in a large knowledge society. Doesn't mean like a high-tech society. It means we have to learn, we have to know a lot. The other part, it's a more systemic, ecosystemic view of the learning sites to take into account all the learning resources in our way to answer adults' many learning needs. So those two things collides and merge in one other fundamental thing of the AMFA. It's to move from a right to education to a right to lifelong learning. It's not synonymous of a right for adult to learn. A right to lifelong learning means at every age of your life, we prepare you to learn what you know, what you have to know now, and what you're gonna have to know in the future. If you're 5, 10, 12, 99 years old. So those, in terms of reflection from a civil society research center, we have first to move away from adult learning because it's our core mission, and to think also of the adult of the future. And one of the aspects in a lifelong learning perspective, I feel we failed as parents, like I said, and as policymaker, it's the learning to be part. It's in the 90s, UNESCO identified 4 pillars: learning to live together, citizenship education, learning to do skill, upskilling, trade, etc., and learning to be. And even and I will conclude with that for this part, they added a new one during the Commission for the Future of Education, is, like I said yesterday, learning to become. It's like learning to be boosted. You have to be somebody, but being somebody is becoming somebody else, because our society is complex. So just to put that on the table, I think as a main idea, to bring back the learning to be dimension and realize that we failed a generation as educators and parents. It's a bit dramatic, but just put it at bemol, like for the sake of the discussion, I just push the argument a bit further.
The homework gets bigger and bigger. We were, for 2 days or 1.5 days, we talk about, literacy, numeracy, etc. But now this is the soft part of being human, that even learn how to be human, how to exist here in a changing world. This is something that we need still to master, and then also get our children and young people to learn about it. But within that, I have other question about reskilling, but I'm not going to ask you that anymore now. I think this is more interesting. There are, multi-players here, the government and, education institutions. But because this is about CSO and the role of the CSO, how do you see the role of CSO in terms of, contributing to develop and then participate or facilitating this kind of learning to be human first?
I would say they're already in the business of the learning to be, because CSO, whatever they feel, if it's field, if it's environment, women issue, etc., they have disciplinary knowledge, but also it's how to debate together. It's a democratic part, the associated association life part, and it's also the empowerment, the autonomy. In a sense, sometimes we feel we have to reinvent the wheel. But I think in terms of learning to be, the origins of school were religious schools. I mean, was learning to be a child, a teenager, a future adult. And I think right now CSO, not from the specific field, but the way they learn people to be an autonomous actor, to exchange with others, to go through the differences to find a commonality. In terms of the capacity to deliberate, the capacity to do consensus, the capacity to disagree without violence, to disagree without arguing and shouting at each other. And in social media, and especially Canada is just up north from North America, from the United States. And when we hear the debate, the political debate in the United States, everybody seems to scream at each other. So that there's a deeper need right now to learn, to relearn to debate in a democratic field. And that's part of learning to be. It's where we intersect with others and we exchange with others. Civil society has been doing that for as long as they exist. And even from a North American and European perspective in the 19th century, the origin of the social movement, union movement, women's movement, later on the environmental movement, the cooperative movement, etc. What they were, they weren't involved in specific field, but essentially what they were, it's teaching people to be autonomous together, teaching people to debate together and create social movement. And what came out of social movement? Human rights. So actually, as civil society, we know what to do. And the organization where I work, we're a umbrella. There's like adult educator in a school-based system at all level, literacy group, community groups, unions are there, social movements are there, researchers are there, and when we debate, we have the all diversity, all the segments of adult learning. We cannot debate the specificity of each of them. Our challenge is to find where to answer the question, who are we as adult educator, as a movement together? What do we want to say, rooted on everybody's experience, but going beyond everybody's experience? So, and many fields, civil society is doing that. So maybe we have to, probably we do, to capitalize more and to extract part of our implicit knowledge and expertise. It's to the democratic debate. And it's much needed right now. And the youth movement is teaching us a lot. From the Arab Spring to in many regions of the world, we see a new understanding, new strategy, new ways of being together, not within organization, but being together in the street, literally sometimes. Being together, using the positive side of social media to coordinate, to talk, to debate. And that's a new brand. When I look at them, I feel hopeful. I feel a bit old. Old in terms of my framing, more organization, structure, movement, agenda, action plan, etc. Not a spontaneity. And that's where civil society, but I would conclude with a specificity. There's, I would say, more oldest model of civil society and their new model of civil society. And in Canada, if you follow the indigenous social movement, and they're designing traditional way, but new way, the youth also, and I feel inspired by the new model of civil society that youth. But sometime, when they get involved into old-fashioned civil society, they feel muted. They feel you have to be elected in a committee and etc. and follow the pyramid and etc. So as older adult, I think we have to just back up a bit and let the new civil society invent itself and invent us through inventing itself.
Thank you, Daniel. I think really we need to be listening more to the young people, to the youth, including also in terms of the kind of learning, the training that is being designed, listening to them. I know in plan, in the many countries that we work in the YE program, we also try to get the engagement with the young people to design the program, including also soft skills, which is very much an important part of plan program. But maybe Anna Maria, you can share with us here about the program that Plan International's been doing on youth economic empowerment, and in particular, really looking at the how do we bring inclusive learning within that and youth participation. participation and innovation. Please,
Yes,
floor is yours.
thank you. Thank you, Dini.
Can we have do you
I
have a
think I
presentation?
have this. Yes. Well, thank you so much for the invitation, and happy to, and really interesting all the discussions and all the insights of the panelists and speakers. I will really start very briefly to have a kind of yes, just for the people that don't know Plan International. Well, Plan International is a global organization. YAYES and Plan Indonesia is part of this federation of Plan International. We're in more than 83 countries all over the world. And if you look at we work with communities. Well, you will see some figures here about our reach in 2022. We work a lot with different communities. We work with different organizations from the public, from the private sector, and we have reached in the last year more than 52 million, where more than 50% are young women. We are, as you see, we're really a child's rights organization, and in the last decades we have been focusing on gender and girls and young women. So, let's see. Yes. So very briefly, why for Plan International is youth unemployment important? Well, I think yesterday there were a lot of information and in the different sessions. There are some figures about youth unemployment. The representation of youth in unemployment is very high in all countries and in all regions. We see also that at least one of 5 people. Oh, sorry, it's a little bit a little bit far for me to read. They don't have education, or they are not in employment, or they are not trained. If we look a little bit more in the gender component, I think from that net youth, 3 of 4 net youth are women. So there we see immediately that the difference. Thank you so much. the participation of young women in the labor market, it's very low in relation to male. If they're in the labor market, they also are unlikely to get a job, or normally in an informal job. And we have also the gap in salaries. Normally, women earn much less than men. So this is really one of the key why we are working on this. We think that there is also through girls and young women, we really think there is we can break the cycle of poverty. With 1 year of education, we have shown that up to 20% of there are additional incomes for the communities. 70% of the incomes are really spent for households and for the children. If we look also about the education, because of the education, women also get children in a later age. They get less children, and also the children are healthy. And if we try to finalize the cycle, then these children also will go more often to school and will be able and encouraged to finalize education. So if we see that digital, there's been a lot of talking during the sessions about digital innovation. We really think that these 2 topics are really key and enables to get this gender equality and looking about also skilling. I would like to share with you one experience of a project that we conducted here in Indonesia and in the Philippines, Wire for Work. That the objective of the project was to develop and to leverage digital tools and innovations to allow young people to adapt to emerging needs of the pandemic, and also to improve their awareness and environmental responsibility. Well, the project, if I look a little bit to the specific digital innovations that we developed, one was Prakerja, that is an e-learning platform that was developed here in Indonesia, where different e-learning courses were created with the youth. That I think that it's something very important. It's not that only well, at the very beginning, I have to admit that we said we're going to do this, but in the process we realized that you are doing something for the youth, so they have to be involved in the whole process of design, what they need, what are their expectations. So we start doing more innovative co-creation approach, to allow us to guarantee that these tools that we were developed there will really allow the youth to get that achievement that they wanted. Well, there are some figures about what we have done in these 5 years. We have reached more than 50,000 young people in Indonesia and the Philippines. 27,000 were really skills, and I think that is important what you said. Soft skills or life skills, it's really key in all our programming. And it's about what Piri also mentioned about how we will prepare for work, but also about their own life project. We really give them the time to think about who I am, what are my needs, what I like to do, where am I good in. So because if you give them these opportunities, they really can understand what they can do in the work. They have the inspiration and the motivation. Because of the age of adolescence, you see that they, for all the age, they are transitioning between childhood and adult. There are a lot of questioners. They don't know exactly what they want. If you see now with climate change, with the wars all over the world, so many uncertainties in the workplace. So this is quite important to give this attention, to give the time the youth to understand themselves and to know themselves very better. So, well, just to share some about some innovations, and here we mentioned about gender transformative, because that is the approach that Plan International applies in all their programming. And what means that we really want to not only it's important to have the participation of young women in but we really go a little bit beyond. We really go to the root causes of inequality. How we can work together with the communities, to understand community leaders and the parents, why it's important that these young ladies participate in these kind of programs. We work with the public sector as well, so they understand that it's needed that the TVET institution, the training institution, they have the installations, the trainers understand how to engage the young people as well. We need to have also allowances to facilitate that they can go to the trainings and they can complete their education in a proper way. So some innovations, well, I said already, we have developed these tools with the support to support inclusive business, but really align with the needs of young women. We have co-designed with them. We have thought about what to do. So their parts, and we also include their ownership. Sometimes you realize that they look as a beneficiary, that they want to receive. the services that SEOs provide, but they also need to have this ownership that they are also responsible of their own future. So this is important. Inclusion is also mainstream in the narrative. If we really look at what is the content of the e-learning, in the narrative we also include that the case studies, the stories, are related with people with disabilities, but also young women. Very specific, very low-tech, lightweight and synchronized online, offline applications, it's very crucial. We see that normally boys have the very last tech mobile phone, but girls have to share their devices. So we have applied, for instance, this kind of e-learning so that they can have different users in the same device. That the e-learning of the gaming that we're developing, that also low-tech, in order that they don't need they have difficulties to download or to use these games. And well, finally, and I think that we have been about the preference of hybrid options. We see that post-COVID, everything went online, and we need to go online 100%. After COVID, we realized that young people really need and really want to have this face-to-face contact. We get that feedback from surveys from or participants of our project, and I was just sharing our experience in Colombia. We have a green entrepreneurship pilot in Colombia, and we have a session with them, and then we ask them, okay, you have participated in the project, what would be the ideal program for new young people? And then the first thing that they say, we want face-to-face. And with some combinations of digital tools to make some trainings, but they really to develop their own, for them it's really important to have that relation and the social interaction. Well, I think that there are a lot of things that maybe you have to want to ask. So this is something about of the learnings and the best practices that we have with digital innovation. If we look at the digital landscape, it's really to start working very early with local governments. So the build the capacity. So it's not only about literacy, digital literacy for young people, but also for the teachers and the training providers. So I think that was something in the discussion today as well. There are a lot of, the second one is about expanding horizon and working with existing platform, TikTok and social media channels. They have the experience. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, and I think the experience they have, it's really an added value. We have different experience with Google here in Indonesia and in other countries as well, where they share their experience about how to work with digital. And we, on the other side, I think it's important, the third point is about ensuring digital safeguarding and data privacy protocols. I think that it's key. It's not mentioned. We are really trying to make everything digital online, but we really have to make sure and ensure that we have safeguarding protocols and private data in place in order to provide a safe environment for normally vulnerable youth. We've seen that during the COVID, people, because they were insulated, they share a lot of their emotions about of what they were feeling, and actually sometimes there is a misuse of that information. So it's really key to have this in place. And certainly, and about finance and budget, we really have to guarantee their allowances to for internet access, and also to that the young people can participate in this project. Where diversity, we really see that there are gender stereotypes still in the work floor, male dominated functions, in terms of education, participation, there's still a lot of work to do there. We need to invest in digital literacy, but also specific for these minorities and not the normal target beneficiaries that we have. So looking at specifically what are the needs, and I think that the experience of Putri and other young people that participate in the project can provide us a lot of feedback on how to do it and how to do it well. Invest in segmentation and analysis. I think that is also important. The situation of young people, of all the challenges that they are facing now, it's really important to understand their situation, and based on that, develop the different content of skills and training that we want to provide them. And finally, I think that it's important about making the digital tools available in local languages, and making figures and where minorities can reflect, can see themselves. In Colombia, for instance, we work in an Afro-descendant population, and we provided with e-learning that we have from a partner there. And one of the first things that they mentioned was, it's good that we have the e-learning, but I couldn't see myself in the content. So, and that makes completely really a gap, you know, and how to reach them. So that kind of very specific, very small details are quite relevant to really make an impact. So I think that's,
Yeah. Thank you, Ana Maria. There's a lot there. I mean, this is, I think, will be available also, right? The sharing and learning. But just link up to what Dr. Piti said about mismatch, about collaborations and participation. I think there's a brief video here that we would like to share to listen more to the young people and also the private sector.
Yeah, I would like to say that within this project, Wire for Work, one of the main components was this development of digital tools, but the other component that was very important is private sector engagement. For our projects, that it's quite crucial to see for the sustainability, but also to understand what are the opportunities, which are the real opportunities that are in the in the marketplace, and the opportunities for business. We really start with a market assessment of a market scan at the very beginning, where we ask the input of the private sector and the companies. We engage them also in the content of the training. I have heard also about mismatch of skills. That is something that repeatedly come, and we try to address that, getting the input of the private sector as well in the content of the training. And finally, I think mentoring, they support with their know-how, and they really want to, companies really want to support the young people that are in our programs. I think that companies also using their voluntary activities for the employees, that is quite motivated, that really want to do that. So I think working with Accenture, that is the partner that funded this Wire for Work project, but also working for with Google, they are very nice experiences where we have. So I would like to share this final video, where you can see some of the testimonies of the young people that participate in the project, but also with some of our strategic partners.
Can we have the video, please?
In the Philippines, we have reported that the unemployment rate for young people is at 12.8%. So, ibig sabihin nito, almost 1 million youth are unemployed. And the reason for this is skills mismatch. Plan International shares our goal in reaching more Filipino at-risk youth and providing them decent and productive employment through skills training. So, inisip namin to utilize our partnership para magkaroon kami ng platform to implement our program.
Sejauh ini ya tantangan bagi teman-teman pekerja muda untuk bersaing dalam pasar kerja di Indonesia, mereka itu harus selalu mengupgrade dirinya. Yang membedakan Yayasan Plan Internasional Indonesia sehingga kami Yayasan Plan Internasional Indonesia ini melengkapi kerjasama kami dengan platform digital. Dan ini sangat membantu ketika teman-teman pekerja muda itu membutuhkan skill atau pengetahuan karena ini bisa dilakukan secara jarak jauh.
Pertama kali saya mengetahui Project Wait for Work saat mengikuti pelatihan di Rednose Foundation pada tahun 2019. Namun berkat proyek ini, saya jadi mampu mempersiapkan diri sebelum terjun ke dunia kerja yang saya minati dan mampu meningkatkan keterampilan yang saya miliki, di mana keterampilan itu sangat penting untuk bekerja nantinya. Dan proyek ini penting bagi saya karena berkat proyek inilah saya mampu mengembangkan diri saya mampu melangkah lebih jauh lagi dan ada di posisi saya sekarang ini.
Thank you. Now I would like just to, before we go forward, just would like to ask Putri, boleh tanya ya? Tadi kan sudah dikatakan apa skill-skill atau keterampilan yang harus dimiliki, ya, untuk bisa berkompetisi di dalam masa pekerjaan di zaman sekarang ini ya. Tapi untuk Putri dan teman-teman Putri, terutama yang dengan disabilitas, menurut Putri, dukungan apa sih yang harusnya ada atau disediakan?
Jadi pertama kan kita punya masalah itu kepercayaan. Dimana mungkin buat sebagian besar orang, fakta bahwa disabilitas itu juga bisa bekerja, bisa berkarya itu masih terdengar sebagai suatu hal yang aneh. Jadi kita butuh orang untuk percaya kalau kita juga punya capability, kita punya skill untuk bekerja. Dan selain itu ketika pada akhirnya kita bersaing, seperti yang dibilang tadi, di dunia kerja kan kita harus selalu upgrade skill. Nah mungkin untuk orang pada umumnya, sekarang platform pembelajaran kan ada sangat banyak. Pelatihan-pelatihan online, ketika kita pengen upskilling ada banyak. Tapi untuk teman-teman disabilitas, lagi-lagi kita punya kebutuhan khusus. Dan meskipun pembelajaran online sekarang sangat banyak, nah sangat minim yang sudah aware bahwa sebagai disabilitas, khususnya disabilitas tunanetra, di mana kita butuh asistif teknologi, kita menggunakan pembaca layar. Jadi sebenarnya seharusnya aplikasi-aplikasi yang ada sekarang itu aware juga dengan accessibility guideline, supaya ketika website-website tersebut diakses dengan teman-teman yang menggunakan asistif teknologi, itu juga bisa akses. Jadi segala macam informasi itu bisa sampai ke kita. Seperti itu. Dan sebenarnya sekarang juga sudah banyak yang punya kesadaran, entah itu dari government institution atau non-government institution, yang dimana mereka tuh mungkin menggunakan mengadakan program di mana ada pelatihan khusus untuk disabilitas mungkin, atau ada kuota untuk disabilitas. Tetapi terkadang mereka nggak memperhatikan, lagi-lagi mereka nggak memperhatikan kalau kita punya kebutuhan khusus. Gitu. Jadi diperbolehkan ikut tapi tanpa diberikan perlakuan khusus gitu. Padahal ya lagi-lagi kita punya kebutuhan khusus. Seperti itu.
Terima kasih, Putri. So there's need to be adaptation and investment. But for to be able to do that, we need to listen and to ask what is the most relevant program and how to deliver that for different kind of group, including with youth with disabilities. According to the time here, we have 1 minute and 5. Okay, but is there any burning questions from the audience? Okay, I think I'm only allowed 1 and 2. Okay, come on, I'll just close my eyes.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
1 more minute,
Yeah.
good.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's very interesting topic that we can discuss more. I'm so interested with the learning for youth, and especially. And as we know that education for children and for youth is not cannot be separate from the role of parents. Yeah, and Indonesia has a facing a problems with the parents that pushing their children to works in the young age is because of economic problems in their house like that. And maybe in the Plan International or UNESCO, maybe can be sharing in here, or maybe have a project or a program for parents education or for youth, for adult education, especially for parents to give them the make their what, yeah, like wider information how to teach their children, so they can be aware that children is must be school and learning, not just to working in the young age, so that becoming their successful children. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We get another one in one go.
So thank you very much for the opportunity. Uh, I think what I wanted to ask is related to the previous question. So I wanted to ask regarding the youth in a more rural setting. So how do Plant International, especially with your work in a more digital platform, access or give access to these youths in these more rural settings? And also, based on experience and so stories from work, I'm also from a CSO background, and there are a lot of resistance from like families, parents, on especially to young women, on receiving education. And how do from either UNESCO, Asian, or Plan International, do the advocacy on training these, educating these parents or elderly into a more open mindset?
Okay, thank you. Would you like to answer? I can add as well from Indonesia perspective, but then I think this is also, I will ask all the panelists to also comment on that, because each of you will have something to add to this based on your experience in the country and your work. But Anna Maria, you want to answer that first?
Yes. Well, in all our programs, the community engagement is one of the pillars. One of the key activities of Plan is really because the presence in rural areas and where not all organizations or other organizations and the private sector or other organizations are. So in all our programming, there is a key intervention in awareness, making introductions on working with the leaders of the communities. We understand that the roles, most communities have a leader, and you really need to start the conversation with them in order to get that awareness and that engage. So there is a long-standing relation where we talk about the specific project, what are we going to do, what we expect, what we can provide to the communities. At the same time, we do the same with parents. we do this awareness, but also we have this particular about gender, why it's important that young women. So we have different sessions in order so they understand that this is an investment and we were going to support, and how to enable the system, how we can support them and how they can be organized in order that young women can participate in the trainings. And I think the last one very particular, we need to we talk in the local language. That is also important. Our facilitators are people from the communities, so they talk the language, and that is again something really important. They know, they understand, so that it's easy also to get the communication and that engagement. And finally, to have parents like champions of programs, parents of previous projects, that they come and they engage and they share their experience and really support that, or
Influence other parents.
influence
Yes.
other parents.
Yeah.
So, and give the security that everything is okay, everything is done with security and with a safe environment. So I think that are some of the key interventions that in general I know.
I think similar in Indonesia. I'm a bit worried about the time, so I will ask Daniel
Just
to comment as
in a
well.
compressed way, one of my observation about adult learning and competence in general is there's a lot of fields that are not taken care of. One of them is parental role, education for parental role. UIL has worked on intergenerational learning, so it's touched indirectly. There's advocacy for older learners, so it's touched indirectly. But in a lot of fields like personal finance and parental role, it's a field in itself, but it's always not, it's rarely put it too upfront. And what the two question is we're not born a parent. We learn somehow to be a parent. In intergenerational context, mothers, fathers are teaching their kid to be, and the gender part is important, because I don't know in Indonesia, but in Canada, we have an issue with a teaching young boy to be a human and a male in the 21st century in a very different context. We have to do that early, because they'll be a father. They'll be a father at one point. So that nutshell, I feel education for parental role is a marginalized and not talked about and not talked enough dimension of learning, issue of learning. Even at UIL, I would speak for ourselves to develop that part. The learning to be, I referred to earlier, parental role, etc. There's so much. UNESCO talks about skills useful for life. And they encompass a wide spectrum of competencies, without putting too much on adult shoulders to say you have to be fluent and expert in everything in life. But there's a zone there that it's underworked.
Being a parent is a lifelong learning in itself, right? Dr. Viti?
I think we are talking about the group of the most vulnerable people, right? The young age parentings, the group of people who located in the very, very remote area. And most of the time, these two problems seems to overlapping very much to each other. And it always happens in the countries that consider least developed economies, low-income countries, probably comparatively close societies. Hence, in order to tackle with these kind of problems, the roles of NGO, CSO, or international organizations themselves is not enough. We need the people in that communities. We need the local government, right? Because, for example, when ASEAN foundations have the projects such as digital literacies, we work with the local NGO, CSO, and in countries like Indonesia and the Philippines, where they still have a very, very remote area, we are not talking about 5G mobile phone signal. We are talking about electricities, right? They don't even have the electricities. Hence, in this very remote area, of course, we need to develop the way we educate them the way we're empowering them. But of course, working with local government, working with sometimes the local institutions such as temple, mosque, the community leaders is also very, very important in order to adapt our project to suitable for their local context. And of course, the lifelong learning, the thing that is not taught in the school is very, very important. For example, in some country in Southeast Asia, sex educations is not mentioned at all in the formal education systems, right? And this sometimes create the young age parenting, which they don't ready on all aspects. They start having babies since they are 14 years old, 15 years old. In some cases, we found even, the girls that pregnant under 10 years old with their member of families, their family members. Hence, this is the thing that need to be tackled. This is the first priority group, but of course, the roles of NGO CSO is not enough. We need more people. We need more hand, and of course, changing mindset of the people, especially in the more relatively close societies, in order to open up. That's the thing we need.
Thank you, Piti. Putri, ada yang mau disampaikan untuk terakhir?
Iya, agak menyambung juga dengan masalah.
Tapi singkat aja ya.
Oh iya. Jadi intinya teman-teman disabilitas tuh kan sering gak dianggap sebagai prioritas karena dengan kondisi disabilitasnya terlepas dari kita yang sebenarnya juga bisa produktif, kita juga bisa sukses selama society juga percaya ke kita gitu. Jadi kita butuh percaya, dimulai dari orang tua gitu. Kadang beberapa teman-teman disabilitas itu bahkan nggak punya keberanian untuk bermimpi karena nggak ada kepercayaan. Gitu. Jadi semoga lingkungan lebih mempercayai kita dimulai dari orang tua, dari pemerintah dan lain-lainnya sehingga kita bisa bersama-sama meraih potensi terbaik kita.
Terima kasih Putri, itu katanya kuat sekali. So this is a very rich discussions. We're talking beyond numeracy, literacy, how to compete with AI, but how to be human, how to be at the essence of it for lifelong learning, and how we need to collaborate to be able to do that, to create an ecosystems that support our young people. So this is a very fruitful discussion. Thank you all the panelists. Thank you, Putri, especially for your feedback and insight to the discussion. As in any, workshop or sessions, we need to have a photo.
Of course.
And thank you, the audience, to sit here and listening and share with us. Oh yeah, and then there's also token of appreciation. Thank you.